Pricks. Amongst the weathered headstones and broken angels of Highgate Cemetery, a creeper of ivy searches with its tendrils over the glossy dew, feeling along the letters of a faded inscription. Each full moon another letter becomes visible, and as the seasons swing over the graveyard, the name of Dracula is grown. Hardly had the ivy completed the final letter when a teenage junkie, lying on a nearby grave with her back against a headstone, realizes that her hypodermic has uncannily gone missing from her arm. As she searches with a stub of candle, a breath of cold air flickers the flame, but a sleeping tomb stands cemetery grave. Dracula saw the fix he had filched from the young junkie as an auspicious sign sent direct from hell. That it was sitting right on his doorstep as it surfaced implied that he had found favour with fate. Consumed by the shadows beyond his empty, mink-lined coffin, the Count watched the increasingly desperate junkie with interest. He needed to obtain a blood supply, of course, but no woman had ever complained about that, and if he did it romantically, it was taken as ardent necking. But there were too many junkies recently, and the blood was terrible. Hypodermics were all the rage, but the Count saw them as little more than a new sexual toy, being used to excess. They lacked the intimacy and physical contact of fangs. He pictured himself lolling back in Gothic gear, caressing the neck of a beautiful lady, while his fingers traced the veins on her exquisite arms. He liked the taste of women, and it was deeply satisfying for them to surrender willingly in the throes of passion and climax dramatically into immortality. It was the best come-on in the world, and the Count pulled damsels by the bushel with it. With a flap of his cloak, he was soaring over the graveyard towards the West End of London, leaving the teenager shaking her fists and swearing violently as he shrank from sight. "Fucking bats!" But that one small whimper was a far cry from the culture he found awaiting him as he flew forth into the demon night. As he wandered the neon streets of Soho, he became aware that a sublimation of the basic vampiric values had taken place during his long, languorous kip. Romance had become subordinate to greed. He saw with horror that vampirism had mutated backwards and given birth to a culture of bloodsuckers who were psychically at each other's throats as opposed to their necks, even though they lacked the proper teeth to do it. And the orgies, whatever happened to the orgies? When there is a lack of orgies, it is a sure sign that things are out of control. Instead of carousing elegance mixed with abandon and luxury, emotional ghosts dated each other in a blur of frantic fractals, with the values of love and art ever changing on a bankrupt stock exchange. Art, money and sex had formed an infernal triangle. Art had copied art and life had copied life, and never the twain had met. Instead of the give and take of sensual love, he beheld a culture of cannibalistic ghosts, eating each other faster than they could digest. Mercenary beings, their lives no longer their own, could ejaculate quite quickly at a Picasso, but they had to keep looking at their watches to see if they had time to come. The present sexual trend was to see the world as a picture and masturbate before it, and a still life was just as sexy as a figure if the price was right. But it had to be a masterpiece, of course. You couldn't just bang any old sketch. The Soho art scene had been his last stomping ground, and he was pleasantly surprised to find the garb was still considered acceptable at the Groucho Club, and no one batted an eyelid at the Colony Rooms. The Gothic flavour still had an edge, along with the haunted dread thing, but the no shadow and no image in the mirror styles were directly opposed to present-day culture, which went out of its way to flaunt itself. Thumbing through his memory and the myths and medieval superstitions surrounding his name, the Count acknowledged that he needed to get out more. His image was fatally out of date. He was browsing the toilets of the French house when a deliciously provocative creature recognized him, winked tantalizingly, and offered him a sample of her blood from a bejeweled hypodermic. He leans forward anxiously, gagging for it, poised on the brink of an exceptional rush. Then she places her thumb on the plunger, laughs cheekily, and squirts it into his absinthe. With a roar of blind lust, he hurls the drink into her face, ignores the lacquered fingernails clawing his cheeks, and bites savagely into the perfect white pillar of her throat. She shudders and moans, but her response is so rabid that he's forced to grab her hair like a bunch of black grapes and drag her head away from him. Then their twin bloods flush through each other as life through death. They feel the uprush of weird energy that signifies they have entered the realm of the chosen ones. They are king and queen of the undead, and lost in each other's eyes, they dance forever in eternal orgasm. And in that eternal clarity, Dracula knew exactly what he must do. He realized that he stood at the apex of a new civilization, and it was his duty to show the positive side, to add a refinement and spiritual dimension to a much maligned vampiric lifestyle. His new religion would champion the priceless gift of everlasting life, a far cry from the everyday conception of existence, which is normally mistaken for living. It was time to legalize vampirism. The females would have no inhibitions whatsoever about looking delightful forever, because the cosmetic technology existed to present a youthful front even when they were coming down. Instead of slowly falling to bits, they would simply slip into another skin from their cosmetic tailor and be instantly available for the evening's frolics. Mad kisses and a wild night, followed by ample time for recuperation, did more good than harm, and, as he swept through the ages, a nip here and a tuck there amounted to no more than modern makeup. Love was just another word for addiction, and no lady could willingly refuse a meaningful relationship that would outlast the concept of time. The Count wasn't conned by his own rhetoric, of course. He figured that everybody would soon be hooked, and he could flaunt his true status of absolute power. The gutters of Soho would run red with blood, but it would not be his, and when the supply ran low, the women would come in shoals, desperate to maintain their ever-soaring habit. He pictured himself tormenting the more beautiful by pricking his finger and watching them beg and drool as they licked up each bright red drop. After a great night out, the Count flew back to Highgate Cemetery with a plumped-up smile on his dark red lips. He perched on a headstone, spread his wings, ready to change back to human form, when the empty hypodermic, thrown like a dart, struck him between the wings and transfixed his cold black heart. Bloody bats,